All right, after taking like a week and a half off, I'm ready to get back to it for day 12. Now, the first step is to get this nasty table out of the way, and this thing has been here for quite some time, pretty much since I parked the camper here. I need to get my ladder over there, so that's why I am moving this around. And anybody who knows me in real life knows that I'm a super weird person, so I pick the worms up off the ground every time I leave something for a long time. Only got a couple of them this time, but that's okay, because these ladies over here will take any snack they can get. It is literally my favorite thing ever to see them running across the yard whenever I walk in. So they get a little snacky snack. They love some good worms. All right, now that they've had their little snacky snack, time to actually get to work. So I'm going to start by taking both of these side rails off, or I guess the rear rails off on the sides. I hadn't really decided if I was going to take this whole back off, but yeah, I did that today. So I really need to finish the rest of this roof, and there's some water damage on the back, and I wasn't entirely sure how I wanted to fix it, but I am glad that I took it off, and you'll see why in just a little bit. So same thing with taking, anything else off in the camper. There's the trim screw cover that you take off, and then you just take the screws out, and the whole thing comes out. And the butyl tape on this was really, really dry, so I'm not surprised that it leaked on both sides. So now that both of the sides are off, you see how easily they just come off. That's how dry this butyl tape was. I'm going to go ahead and take the lights off. There's basically just a cover that comes off, 2 screws, and then I just clip the wires. I'm not going to bother saving these because I always replace the lights in the campers anyway. I replace them with full LEDs. That way you don't actually have to worry about if the bulbs go out. So I'm just taking all these off and basically throwing them on the ground. So I'm just going to take this whole thing off piece by piece. Now, if you're interested in how I replace these, I do have another video on my channel about upgrading your exterior lights to LEDs, and I would highly suggest doing this because they are so much brighter than the bulbs. All right, next there's a black tank flush in the back here, so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect that, and then this whole bottom piece is actually plastic, so I'm going to take all of these screws out and then kind of drop it to the ground and let it hang. I'm not going to bother disconnecting all these lights because I honestly haven't looked in to see if I can replace these lights yet, so until I figure that out, I'm just going to leave this pretty much just hanging on the ground. I mean, it's supported, so it's not putting any stress on the wires, but I do have to take this piece off in order to get the whole back part off. So you'll see right there, I kind of just pry it off, and then there's one screw that didn't quite come out. So once I got that one little screw out, it pretty much just dropped to the ground, and it'll just stay supported right there until I figure out what I want to do with it. Now there's this black tarp material right here that I'm just kind of tearing down so I can get to the screws that are underneath here. So this is actually screwed into the frame, and it's only like a couple screws that hold this entire thing in. And when I started taking these off, there's like 4 or 5 screws on the bottom, I think 1 screw on the sides, and then I thought there was some up top. But before I get to why there was no screws up top, I'm just going to go ahead and take this window out because the window actually holds the whole thing together. So right now, all you got to do is just take all the screws off from the inside on the trim, and then if you see, I'm holding the middle of the window here while I take that out because I wasn't sure if the window was going to fall out or not. Once I realized it was okay, I actually went and I disconnected the black tank flush. I twisted the whole thing out. And then, oh yeah, look at this. Look how nasty that is. So it's completely clogged. So I don't know if this black tank flush was ever used, but I thought that was really interesting. Anyway, like I said, I thought there were screws up at the top holding this whole thing in until I started to take the window out. Okay, this is just me using a putty knife. Done this a million times, just trying to take it out. And usually once you kind of get the bottom part separated, the whole window will come out. Oh, and there it went. Yep, there it went. And if you saw me move my head, I said, well, that's one way to do it, which is true. That's one way to do it. And if anybody ever asks, Heather, why do you go to the gym so much? This is it right here, because I get myself into situations like this very often. And this wall was actually really heavy. So I picked up the whole thing and moved it into a place in the yard where I could lay the whole thing down so it wouldn't crack. So that's where we are. It just came off. So good times, guys. Good times. I don't really know if I'm I'm upset or I'm happy that this thing came off that easy. But anyway, I'm still glad I took the whole thing off. So same thing with the front cap. I'm just going to start scraping. The difference is this is actually real wood. The front cap was pretty much glorified cardboard, but this is actually like 5mm underlayment, which is probably why this back piece held together so well. So I'm just kind of going to go inch by inch. And if you see I move around here a lot, it's because I'll start on a spot and then I can't really get any pieces. And so when that happens, I kind of move to a different spot to see if I can get more leverage somewhere else. And then I just move around the whole piece right there until I can get all of it loose. And you see that came off in a nice big piece. So just if you get frustrated, if you start in a place and it's just not coming up and it's not working, move to a different spot and then you can come back to it, or maybe you'll get lucky and it'll come up pretty easily like it did for me. So this actually took me about 10 minutes to get all of the wood off of this, and I was a little nervous to begin with because I wasn't sure if it was going to rip that plastic backing, or I guess the Phylon, whatever you want to call it. But it actually didn't. The trick was when I was ripping up the whole pieces, I would stick my foot underneath the piece and hold the backing down while I pulled up. That way it wasn't such like a hard force going up.
That is bad. I mean like the bottom of it.
Yeah, it looks pretty bad, huh?
I always love it when my kids come out and have this like really cute commentary, so I had to share that with you guys because I'm always doing ridiculous things and my kids are like, "Mom, what are you doing back here?" So yeah, I'm pretty sure they think I'm crazy, but that's okay. All right, so this is going to be very similar to the process that I did on the front cap. The only difference is I'm actually going to use 5mm underlayment, and I don't have any curves, so I don't have to cut any. I don't have to make any relief cuts in it, which is nice. So this is a new type of epoxy that I'm using. It is a 1-to-1 ratio, just like the other stuff, but it's in a smaller quantity. And I will link that below for you guys. I have not used this epoxy before, but I know the other epoxy that I have is really expensive. And I mean, it's like $200-300 for the epoxy kit. And I think this was like $70. So I feel like that's more reasonable if you're just doing like one. So anyway, I'm going to try this and I'll let you guys know how it works, because if it works just as well, this is definitely going to be a cheaper option for you guys instead of buying that really expensive kit. So I guess we'll find out in 24 hours. That's pretty much how long this should take to cure. But same thing, I just kind of mixed it together and poured it, and then I actually rolled this out. I've never used a foam roller on it before, but I didn't have a brush. It did end up falling apart at the end, but I made it work until I could get to the very last piece. So yeah, you can use a brush, you can use a foam roller, you can use whatever you want to use as long as you get full coverage on this thing. And I want to stress that full coverage is important because you want the pieces to fully join together. You don't want any spots where there's no epoxy on there, because if that happens, then you're going to have a bubble in it. And I mean, not the biggest deal ever, but it's still, if you're doing it, you might as well do it right. So after I had cleaned and scraped all the old wood and kind of let this out in the sun to dry for a little bit, I just put it on here. And as you can see, I mean, it looks fairly clean. There's no wet spots. There's no loose or raised pieces of wood anymore. So that is pretty much what I wanted. And then I'm just going to keep spreading this out. I did it halfway because I didn't want the epoxy on the other side to start to harden before I could put this on. So that's why I kind of just split it up like that. I mean, you can do it either way if you think you're fast enough. I don't think the cure time on this is like a crazy amount or anything. I think it's got a pretty good workable time. So you can use your own discretion on which you think is best for that. So same thing as before, I'm pretty much just going to find whatever I can find to stack on top of this thing and put weight on it. I want this to be as much even pressure as possible all throughout the entire thing. So I just found random pieces of wood and scraps of plywood that I stuck down, and then I will end up putting weights on all of it just to kind of make sure it's compressed into that epoxy so it'll have a good set on it. After I was done, it ended up looking something like this. I literally just used anything heavy I could find. And then I went outside to start working some more, and it is pouring rain. So I guess I'm done for the day. Maybe see you guys tomorrow if it's not raining.